Hi there. In this next tutorial vid, we're going to be working with still photographs. I think commonly we think of GIFs as being video animations, but they can be made from stills, and in some cases there may even be reasons or advantages to using stills for your GIFs. So there's also a great deal that can be learned about sort of building video-based GIFs from stills. So we're going to be looking at stills and some of those other things that sort of will play out even when we move into video that I want you to be aware of, and that I'm going to introduce in this lesson are sort of overall file size and file dimensions, which we've talked a little bit about. Making multiple frames from layers, reversing the order of frames, duplicating and adding new frames, using text, and something called tweening. So with that as kind of the introduction, let's get started. I have loaded a selection of images into this program, Adobe Bridge, which accompanies, it's part of the package that comes with Photoshop, and it's a content management system for photographs. And there are many content management systems for photographs. It will also work with video. Because it's an Adobe product, it's designed to what's called round trip or dovetail with Photoshop. So it's going to allow me to, or it allows me to automate some features, particularly those dealing with multiple images, as I move those images into Photoshop, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. But before we get there, I want to point something out to you. So here are two images, both from different photo series, photo GIFs I'm going to create. The one on the left is from a series of portraits of children in Libya. And I didn't really, at the time, intend to use this at all as a GIF, and I shot verticals. And you obviously you see a lot of vertical photographs. You see a lot of mobile phone, particularly amateur mobile phone video shot vertically. Verticals create a lot of problems in terms of design and page layout. So what I would suggest for GIFs right off the bat, if you're shooting video with your phone, if you're shooting photographs, horizontals. For this one, I had to, you can see this black canvas. I created this black canvas to give the images that 4:3 traditional horizontal aspect ratio. In the image on the right, which is from a story from a couple of years ago on programs in Florida to move people who live in large public housing projects or large public house communities into more integrated communities. But this one was shot to be used as part of a series of videos. So the photographs were carefully shot to sort of have this 16:9 ratio, aspect ratio to it. There are a couple other issues with this, and throughout this tutorial I've left some problems like the vertical image so I can show you, so you can better see things you need to watch out for when you're making GIFs. If what you want is something, a little bit more professional than the typical kind of memes you see on Giphy. So with that, let's get started. I am going to, by selecting the leftmost image here, holding the Shift key and selecting the rightmost image, it will select all of these images in in Adobe Bridge. What I'm going to do now with Bridge is load these all into a single image. This is one of those automated features that Bridge allows. I'm going to load it into a single image in Photoshop, each as its own layer. Now, if you were using multiple images in Photoshop alone without Bridge, you would basically have to create a layer manually for each of the photos you want to be part of your GIF. This is going to automate it for me. So I'm going to go to Load Files from Photoshop Layers. And it'll take it a second. And it'll put them all in. And you can see it creating the layers from the images on the right. So we've done this before. I'm going to tell it I want to create a frame animation by clicking there. And then I'm going to move each one of my layers. I'm going to make a frame from that layer. And at this point, we could be done. I can play my GIF. As we've done before, I can adjust the time. I'm going to adjust each frame as a group because they've all been selected to play for 1/5 of a second. I'm going to tell it to loop 3 times. And there you have it. Now what I want to do now is introduce a few other tools available to you to sort of change, modify the behavior of a GIF and make them a little bit more creative. So you can see the way that this is set up, it moves from in focus to out of focus. What if, for one creative reason or another, I wanted it to do the opposite, to move from out of focus to in focus? I've selected them all. I'm going to my little double-decker hamburger icon, and I'm going to reverse the frames. Right? And now if I play the GIF, it will go from out of focus to in focus. What if I want to, for one reason or another, duplicate a single frame or group of frames? If I want to duplicate a single frame, I select that frame, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, and then I just hit this little duplicate window. In this case, to illustrate something, I want to duplicate all the frames. So again, I'm Shift, selecting all, and I'm going to duplicate all the frames. Now if I just duplicate the frames, notice the way the GIF plays. I'm going back to the first frame here, out of focus, in focus, snap, back to out of focus as it gets to the first added frame. But what I can do if I, in the interest, and this is sort of very often the case with GIFs, if I want to create a perfect loop, I can select these last 12 frames, the frames I copied and added, and I can reverse that group of frames. And now this GIF plays as a genuine loop. And the number of frames, the 22 frames that this particular GIF is made out of, is almost arbitrary. Depending on how big you want the file size to be, which we talked about, depending on how smooth you want it to be, you could add more or reduce the overall file size. There's one more thing I want to show you with this particular set of images, and then we'll move to the other set, and I'll sort of build there. What I want to show you now is text. And, one of the things in terms of the relationship between frames and layers you always need to be very careful of is, where you are in both the frame panel and the layer panel. So I'm going to be very careful and still make sure I'm on the first layer and first frame, right? And now I'm going to add a text layer. And if you think back to the last video, the sort of cutout profile of the man's head for the cog video, basically a text layer is going to behave the same way. So I'm going to add and I can, in Photoshop, adjust where exactly the text lays in the image. And you can see it on top of the stack in the layers panel. These sort of added layers do not appear in the frames panel, but part of the rationale for Photoshop designing this to do this way, that text overlay, in effect, will play throughout the GIF. And that's as far as I want to go with the demonstration with this one. I want to switch now to the photographs of the kids to illustrate basically to take particularly the behavior of text and some ideas about what you could do with photos as GIFs a little bit farther. So I'm going to close out of this. I'm not going to save it. One of the things I did not do in this tutorial, but it's in the troubleshooting guide, is really each time you sort of move to a new and successful step in building your GIF, you should save. The rationale being that, particularly when it comes to the relationship between frames and layers, Photoshop can get kind of kludgy, so you just want to save your good work.